Hi, everybody. Daniel Johnson from the Venza Dutch office. Thank you for attending this webinar on the topic of industry staffing challenges in hospitality. We've got an all-star cast of industry experts, and we will let them introduce themselves in a moment, as well as Alan from our team is going to be our presenter talking about some topics. So without further ado, why don't we find out who our industry experts are? We will go in, let's go in alphabetical order, and that just by chance happens to be ladies first. So Andrea, tell us about yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Case. I am the Director of Human Resources for PRM Hotels. I've been in human resources for about 12 years and specific to hospitality the last 6.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andrea, for being here. Rakesh, Rocky, tell us about yourself.
Good afternoon, Rakesh Gupta, go by Rocky. With Atrium Hospitality, I'm the VP of IT for Atrium, based in Atlanta, Georgia. Been in IT about 25 to 30 years, but in hospitality IT, only about 2.
Okay, so he's the newbie, so be kind, be nice.
That's right, be nice.
Okay, Ron, saving the best for last. Tell us
Good
about
morning.
yourself.
Ron Harden, Director of IT for the Sandestin Golf and Beach Resort in Miramar Beach, Florida.
Okay.
I've been in hospitality IT management for about 40 years and still loving it.
Wow, 40 years. You were 4 when you started, though, right?
Exactly.
That was a very precocious child. Great to have you all.
Child labor laws.
Yeah, we have to look into that. Yeah, it's now on the record. So thank you all for taking your time to be here. And as the industry experts, the goal is, as with all of our webinars, to make sure that what we're saying resonates and is accurate with your experiences there in the industry. So without further ado, let's hear from Alan. Alan, introduce yourself and then feel free to share what you've got.
Sure. I'm Alan Zaccario. I have about 27 years of hospitality experience in the field and in corporate. And actually, I've been with Venza relatively short here, but in addition to what you're kind of talking about here, my point of view is going to come from peer-to-peer and also vendor-to-vendor in the allied vendor relationships we have with other MSPs and MSSPs, and also vendor to client. We have a very diverse portfolio of clients who themselves have diverse portfolios. They come from different management styles and compositions of their portfolios, which brings about different labor requirements. So we need to kind of differentiate for the scope of our discussion here that there's on-property requirements, and there's also the above-property corporate requirements. They're 2 diverse and different requirements. So we'll kind of talk about that in a bit, but let's start in with some definitions. You know, hospitality IT professionals are a little bit different than most of our peers out there in IT. By that I mean a hotel IT technician is different than an IT technician in a hotel. From a hotel IT technician standpoint, they're asked to do things that aren't always kind of the classic IT. In 1 minute they'll be working on a PC, and the next they want to know why the channel 6 is out up in the guest rooms, or why the public address system is scratching, why the door locks aren't opening. So they're very diverse. They consider them as technologists. And many of the people that we have and our peers are technologists. They came up through the ranks, or they're familiar with the processes in the hotel. Now, an IT technician themselves might have come straight out of school or in a different field. They're getting classically trained, which kind of makes you feel like they should have been like some IT Juilliard or something. But generally, they have very significant experience in specific concentrations. They might be a computer tech, a network tech, an administrator, and they're a little bit easier to be able to find. Certainly go on Indeed and just type in IT technician, lots comes up. Type in hotel IT technician, you usually get a, well, you're looking for this, aren't you? It's hard to recruit for something as diverse of a requirement at the property level as it is for an IT technician. In general, at the corporate level, the peer-to-peer that we're seeing and the client to vendor that we're seeing, we have a lot of our peers out there who are hotel IT techs, but there's also a rise in classically trained IT folks as well, which is really important at the corporate level, because they're generally overlooking many portfolios and many product lines, and they need to be specifically tasked to be able to keep the networks in check, administration in check, and those are the folks that we find a little bit easier to be able to find from a recruiting standpoint. They, in general, one of the things we're seeing as a trend is the question that's not too popular: should I and could I restock the shelf with IT professionals? We were all affected by COVID in different levels. We had a reduction in staff. Some of them were willingly. They left because of other opportunities, but some, unfortunately, we had to let go. As far as getting those back again, it's not as easy as it sounds. For one thing, I think we might have missed the boat on something. On a department level, did we really do a business risk assessment? Did we look at the positions, the pay, and the requirements for that position, and kind of determine whether or not we could do without, and at what level could we move some of those responsibilities around? More importantly, was there a salary level that would have kept the individual? Now, COVID is a wild card anyway. No matter what we did, it probably wouldn't have mattered if we had done a risk assessment. But if we had, could we have saved somebody in the organization and not have to worry about replacing them right now? The people that left either left voluntarily, or maybe they sought kind of a safe harbor in another industry. And you know what, folks? They may not be coming back. The one thing we got to see ourselves in is an unstable network, an unstable industry. When you think about it, the next pandemic that comes around, we kind of know how it's going to affect hospitality. Even the whisper or the whiff of there being another pandemic might send the travel industry maybe not into a tailspin, but to a downward cycle. And I think people are thinking about that, especially those that left. Is this something I want to go back into, or can I go somewhere else? So that might also be kind of limiting us in that pool of those technologists we were talking about, the specialists on the hotel property that know how to interact with the different systems, the ones we so desperately need. Now, hiring itself is a constraint. If you think about it right now, I'm sure all the folks on this call are saying, I can't hire customer-facing line-level people fast enough. The priority for IT hiring slips behind that, because those customer-facing associates are the ones that are actually driving the business right now. They're the ones that the guests want to see, cleaning, maintaining, checking people in and out. That's what makes them comfortable that going to a hotel is in fact the right move at this point. So just hiring people for IT is kind of maybe a second thought at the property level, maybe not even possible. The corporate level, it's becoming more and more important, because we're starting to feel the strain of turning these properties back up again, getting them back online, and realizing that it took a lot more to bring them up than it did to bring them down. So I think we run a risk too, that the longer we wait to restock, the more that talent that was kind of on the fence, they're going to go somewhere else. And then we're going to have to train and kind of bring on the next breed, the next lineage of hoteliers. And I think that's a challenge for all of us, right?
Yeah, let me jump in here, Alan, and find out from the panel here if things are resonating. Firstly, from the HR standpoint, Andrea, and you, Ron, running an IT team, is what Alan's saying, that kind of unique resourcefulness that's on property. Do you think that's actually the case? That do you think on property IT is a bit of that technologist role? Do you truly seeing that as unique? Andrea, maybe.
It is unique, and Alan hit it on the head with the status of the industry right now. FAU just recently released a study that they had conducted. A third of the individuals that are not back in the industry are not coming back. They have found homes in other industries that don't operate 365 days a year on Christmas and Thanksgiving and during their daughter's recital. So a third of those individuals aren't coming back to the industry. And I think with the recruiting standpoint at the property level, it's going, what I'm seeing is it's going to become homegrown. It's going to become individuals that are already in place, that are internally learning some of the systems and processes, trial by error, to take care of those issues at the property level.
Well, that's it's hard to create anything that is in any way uniform and efficient if it's going to be kind of homegrown and based on who's available.
Mhm.
Is that what you're experiencing, Ron, as well?
Yeah, it's a very multifaceted issue. You know, there's kind of the general industry-wide issue of you need really solid technical skills, because at the end of the day there are servers and networks and infrastructure and security and administration under all of this stuff. And all that stuff has to be managed and administered and supported. And that takes a very strong skill level, and it takes a width, a breadth of experience and knowledge. And then you layer on top of that some of those unique eccentricities of our industry that you mentioned. That's a difficult skill set. And as Andrea mentioned, a lot of that ends up being organic. You bring in the younger IT generalist in maybe a desktop support role, and then over time they learn those hospitality specific applications. They learn some of the unique aspects of what we do in hospitality tech, and they become that specialist. Of course, that's a great line of professional development. And what you're trying to avoid while you're doing that is you're trying to avoid them, like Andrea mentioned, saying, well, this industry is nuts. I'm not going to stick around and wait for the next downturn and get laid off again, or I'm not going to be on call every other week because this business is 24/7, 365. I'm going to go to some place that's 8 to 5 Monday through Friday and has better pay and better benefits and isn't weird like hospitality. So that's a struggle. And then in our case, it's a tough labor market. And I guess there's examples of that all over the country, but you know, we're near the beach. It's a resort community. The cost of living is going through the roof. The cost of housing is going completely bonkers. And people we can find that want to work here can't afford to live here. And we can't afford to pay them enough to live here. So that's happening in a lot of places around the country.
Just compounds the issue. Before we hear the second half of what Alan's prepared, I want to ask you, Rocky, coming from the financial industry, risk averse, typically a lot of instruments used to measure risk. Alan indicated that, trying to paraphrase a little bit, maybe there wasn't properly calculated the risk with furloughing and reduction of staff, and perhaps the industry hadn't acted maybe a little rash. Your background in finance, come into hospitality just before the pandemic. From your vantage point, do you think what Alan is saying, that the reduction was maybe a little rash, we didn't properly weigh the risk?
Well, I don't. It was definitely not, properly weighed. The risks weren't properly weighed, but I think the industry was in such a panic because all the industry went from an 80% occupancy to a 15% occupancy literally overnight.
Yeah.
So I don't think there was a time to strategize. It was a very tactical decision at that point. The strategy didn't come into play. It was just a tactical decision because, like, okay, we're looking at a 15% occupancy. We've got, a debt pool that we need to look at.
Yeah.
How do we react to that quickly?
Yeah.
And like Alan said, IT is almost like a tier 2 organization in hospitality. I come from an industry where IT was supreme. We ruled the companies. But over here, the motto is putting heads in beds. That's the business model in the hospitality industry. So IT is almost like a second tier. So obviously, hiring an IT is also, a second tier decision. And so it's not, and I think Alan hit it on the head, was like, yes, we didn't weigh the risks properly because we couldn't afford to at that time. At that time, it wasn't a strategic decision. Most companies laid off 60% of their staff. So, at that point, strategy really goes out the window. It's all about tactical decisioning at that time.
Yeah. You're taking on water and you gotta get off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
IT
'cause
is one of those pieces of the puzzle that you don't know when it's working, but you know when it's not.
Exactly.
And
There's an
so
old
the
there's an old
value of that is,
adage. Yep. And there's an old adage, like, the IT team is usually, if you look at those old steamer ships, those people putting coal in the fire, that's where we are forgotten. But the moment the ship stops running, that's when you realize how come nobody's pumping coal into the furnace anymore.
Yeah,
Mhm.
which was where the risk assessment portion really came in. That had we looked at the positions and the duties of those positions, even though we had to let people go, at least we knew what skill sets we needed to keep the business running. And that's where I think we might have overstepped or missed, that we didn't do that. We just looked at it as a single position. They're gone now, but I didn't really know what they did. And in some cases, the people that did know what they did, they left too. So it was a lop off from the senior management level down. So that's where we were. I think where we got to look at where we're going too. So
Yeah, no, we doing a little kind of look in the past, little Monday morning quarterbacking. Let's talk about your next second half, the retaining of those professionals, Alan.
yeah. So now that we've kind of got them, I do want to mention one thing though, is that the we're not perceived sometimes as cutting edge, and just like IT isn't the primary driver in hospitality, some of the things we do, other than the caveat here is casinos, gamings, resorts, they do they're a different segment. But for the most part, many of the hotel operators at this point are branded. And from the outside looking in, attracting people is hard to do if you're looking at, well, all they ever do is really a network. And they have access to data, but it's not big data. So, it's a spreadsheet, big deal. So it's hard just from that aspect alone to get good IT people. But the people that you do have right now, and we talked about having people that need to be trained and ingrained. As far as salaries go, I mean, I think anything is possible right now, but being able to compete with some of the other allied third-party vendors is going to be tough. And when you consider as well that prior to 2018, there was a rise in those MSPs and MSSPs as well, and it's continuing on. The folks that we're talking to now as our vendors and peers, they are affirming that people are using third party now to supplement jobs and responsibilities that weren't there. But the people that you do have, you have to make sure that they're feeling comfortable that they're not next in the block. They're not the next one who's going to go. So how can you do that? One of the things that you can do is to make them feel a little bit more important by giving them duties, maybe not dotted line or direct line responsibilities, because it'll change their description and you have that kind of responsibility creep. But if you have somebody who's really good with Excel, make them kind of the Excel masters and create spreadsheets, help out accounting, who also lost people. Be able to share your resources interdepartmentally. At the property level, they need it as much as the corporate level. But find some of the skill sets that your people might still have. Don't let them detract from what they do, but add to it. The other thing is that we have tools out there now that we've been paying for that have capabilities we haven't even tapped yet. As an example, we all probably bought AV style enterprise grade solutions. And in that AV implementation, most likely there's node reporting. From that node reporting, you can get a list of assets per property. From that list of assets, you can figure out via a search when's the end of life for that particular PC. You can create a spreadsheet on the age of machine. You can take that and figure out an amortization chart and a replacement schedule. You can take that and figure out what the CapEx plan is for a property 5 years down the road. That's just from using one tool, one asset of it. And that would make that individual kind of the master of CapEx just by using what's there, and it helps the rest of the department. How much of that is out there? There's tons of that functionality. As far as the most important thing I think now is to communicate with your staff about where you are as a team within the organization from a property level. Don't be afraid to ask questions as leaders now. There was a line in a song not too long ago, maybe it's a lot longer than I think, but freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Don't be afraid to speak your mind, because now replacing you is as difficult as replacing these technologists we were talking about. They want to hear from you, most likely. And then finally, I want to skip to the last point, is to kind of stress for your staff that we got through this together. It's part of history now, and you were part of history, and we are stronger for it. You survived, whereas others did not. They didn't make it through. So stress that as a point. I think that's a good summation at this point, Daniel.
So just so I'm clear, was that Janis Joplin that you're referencing as the new song?
I'm a lot older. Oh, I'm not even allowed to say older anymore. I had my sensitivity training. I am matured.
That's very good.
Janis Joplin, but Chris Christopherson actually wrote the song. Yeah.
Okay. I like it. Good. So
I'm here to educate.
love it. So I want to go back to you, Andrea, on and let's start from the what was just shared, and we'll go backwards. The organizational vision, from your standpoint in HR. I mean, how is that something that is hot? Is that something that people in HR are saying, yeah, you've really got to communicate that? Is because do people care about it, or is that just a fluff?
They do care about it, but they care more about their direct supervisor. It was very apparent the properties that stayed in contact with their team and with their staff, because their staff came back first. Their staff either never left, agreed to stay on at their personal and professional risk during the pandemic, or they came back first. But in a little summation of what Alan spoke to, I call them my 4 C's, one being culture, but the other 3 that he spoke to was contribution, community, and communication. And that's what it is. It's taking somebody with their skill set, good at Excel, let's expand it, and they're contributing to the organization. There's a tangible contribution, and people want to feel that. They want to feel that they're having an impact in the organization. The communication, the company vision, what's going on, where you're at. Hey, sitting down and saying, what are your thoughts? Like, what is it going to take for you to stay with us? Like, having that communication with them one-on-one, and not be afraid of that conversation, because to quote the line, if they're looking to leave, the sooner you know it, the more room you have to do something about it. And then the last piece, that community, that you went through this together, we're part of the team. What are your visions? The company can say so much of what they want their vision, and ideally we all align to that vision. But finding out what the individual is looking for in their community and the workplace that they come to every day.
Wow, very good. The 4 C's. Make sure we get that down in the there was the 4 or the 5. 4 was commitment
4.
in there as well. 4 C's. Okay. Very cool.
Commitment's a good one though. We can make it 5 C's. It's flexible. I like 5 C's.
So I want to ask you, Ron. Alan brought up some very beneficial tactical benefits of just one tool. From your experience, do you think that there is kind of untapped resources in some of the some of the technical tool sets that are out there, as Alan had referenced? Is that
Oh,
your experience
absolutely.
too?
Yeah, and that's fairly typical. We see a lot of stuff that was um, purchased, implemented, maybe not implemented all the way, maybe not implemented to its fullest advantage. Then time passes on, the members and structure of the user community moves on, and somebody latches on to the next shiny object. And over time, you accumulate a variety of shiny objects, and the slightly older shiny objects start to get less shiny and less used. And at some point, the rational approach is to stop buying new shiny objects and try to squeeze a little more value out of some of the stuff you already have. The but part of the economic discussion and part of the staffing discussion is that there's going to be this dichotomy between the people that know at an intellectual level and even profess to believe in the concept of it's cheaper to retain talent than to replace talent. Just like it's cheaper to keep existing customers than it is to go find new customers. If you can retain the talent you already have, that's almost always going to be your best play than losing them and having to go out and replace them. And everybody seems to be in agreement on that intellectually, but then that tends to butt heads with deeply ingrained ways of thinking and doing business in a lot of organizations. People that are like, we never do more than a 2 or 3% increase per year. We don't promote people unless they're moving into a measurably different job. We don't make salary adjustments. They should have negotiated a better deal when they started. There's and the bottom line is king, and margin has to be protected at all cost. And if that means that people aren't happy with what they're making and they end up leaving, well, then they should just leave. Well, but then that flies in the face of this concept of, wait a minute, I thought we all agreed that it's better to keep people and maybe we need to pay them some more to keep them. Oh yeah, we absolutely agree with that. So, okay, so which is it? And I know that there are just a lot of organizations struggling with that, particularly in a tight labor market.
Yeah. Sounds to me that hitting on a lot of resonance with what Alan's sharing and your experiences. As we are wrapping up this webinar, Rocky, as the rookie in hospitality, I'm going to ask you the hardest question.
Okay.
Anything that you were expecting that we would discuss that didn't get discussed, or anything that's surprising that Alan covered that you hadn't expected? Is there anything that's missing in this conversation?
Well, I think the thing that's missing is, we keep calling IT people technologists. We need to start calling them problem solvers, because that's what IT people do. And if you have technology as a problem solving organization, that lends itself to being a better business partner and help drive revenue. It's all about solving problems, because I used to be in sales a long time ago, and I used to work for CA, and I used to run services for them. And I used to tell my sales guys, don't go out and sell software. Any fool can sell software. Go out to a customer and find out what the problem statement is and resolve that problem, and you have a customer for life. That's what technology does. Technology doesn't do patches and upgrades and work networks. It's a problem statement that you're trying to resolve. As long as you can communicate that with the business, IT suddenly gets a seat at the table after that. And I think everybody, nobody talked about that. I think that's what needs to be focused upon, I think.
Yeah. So the moniker is actually more damaging, does more damage than good.
Correct.
Yeah.
Calling them pure technologists pigeonholes them into all they talk about is bits and bytes, but technology is a lot more than bits and bytes.
All they do is plug things in and turn them on and off. Not as inspiring. What do you think, Andrea, about that?
I think that's an interesting point, but I think that's a empowerment we should give to every position, regardless of your rank or title, whether you're a guest service agent, a general manager, a technologist. Problem solving should maybe be number one on the job description, and empower individuals to make those decisions. Often, I think we get caught up in the red tape of who's making the decision. But I agree, problem solving is increasingly a skill set that is not as tangible as it used to be. I think there's a I don't know, like a black hole of like who can make the decision, especially during COVID when everything was like every penny had to be accounted for and only the VP could sign off on something, and trying to go back into a market of the occupancy and the challenges that we're having. Like, we have to empower people to be problem solvers. And I think that goes a little bit to the challenges that Ron was discussing about, okay, it's more cost effective to retain the talent we have, but we don't want to spend the money to do so. I sit in a number of different HR groups, and I think that conversation is shifting. I think the conversation of what does our industry really offer? What is attractive in our industry? If a third of the people aren't coming back, why would somebody starting their career come to hospitality? And so I think that conversation about aligning the skill set with the salary range is becoming more and more prevalent in organizations.
Yeah.
And
if I could just interject for 1 second, the nature of hospitality technology management, hospitality technology support has also been directly affected by high turnover, short staff and high turnover, and not just in the IT side. We're fortunate that we're fully staffed in my IT group, knock on wood. But on the user side of the community, they are very short staffed and they're experiencing high turnover, and that's putting massive strain on us from a support administration standpoint, because it's our user community is constantly turning over, and half of them are constantly untrained.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too is that at the property level, technology is your task, but hospitality is your job. So you're customer facing, and that's the most important feature and asset that you bring to your position, is the ability to service and make those guests feel comfortable, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little different variant than other industries.
I do have a question, maybe to answer the one that you posed to Rocky, Daniel. I'm interested in seeing how technology might be the solution to some of the staffing challenges. How can we implement and use technology to support our front desk? A lot of front desks maybe had 2 or 3 agents on it that now we're only having 1 agent on it. What can we do with technology to make that manageable, where maybe the guest is doing more of their independent check-in and not having the staff coming back can be replaced with technology?
I think there's a considerable push in for the last year, a lot of discussions about contactless check-in and creating kiosks and so that people can check in, and for the benefit of not being exposed potentially to infectious disease, but being able to leverage some of that. I mean, we've been talking about contactless and remote check-in for years.
Yeah.
And it was, how are we going to do it? And remote mobile key systems, and there's just dragging feet. How are we going to do it? And then all of a sudden, COVID, lot of investigations, and lots of throttled that up considerably.
And a lot of the throttling and forward motion is going to be driven by the major flags and how they take up the task and the mantle of being able to do, as you said, Andrea. How can they use the technology? But for those hoteliers that are franchisees, they don't have the ability to actually utilize some of the technology where they would like to. So a lot of it will be coming from the brands themselves of the flags.
Correct. A lot of that is brand mandated, and unless the brand approves it, it's very difficult to implement new technologies. But like Daniel said, one of the things that COVID did was it accelerated the push to automation.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, you go to an airport now, you can check in and put your luggage in and get on the plane almost independently.
Right.
Yeah. And one of the things that we were just looking at a recent CoStar study about the number of conversions. Conversions go up considerably during times of cyclical change, recessions, etc. And so a lot of properties deflagging and going from branded to independent, and then they can leverage all sorts of different technology, and they kind of have their hands back on the steering wheel in terms of where they go technologically to maybe help solve some of their staffing challenges. Very cool. Well, maybe this is a good stopping point. This is supposed to be 30 minutes. We're over tad by 5 or 6, 7 minutes. Thank you everyone for your thoughts. Thank you, Alan, for preparing and putting yourself out there and being ready for this August panel to shoot you down. But it sounds like we got a lot of there's a lot of resonance there. So thank you all for being here, and for everybody that's out there, thank you for attending this Venza webinar.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be ending the webinar.
Very good. Thanks, Sean.